So our final keynote of the day in the Trends and Insights room is going to be delivered by Fabian, who is Head of Sales for FLYR Hospitality. And so he's going to take us on a journey through the evolution of revenue management from its airline origins to today's AI-powered era, and explore how human expertise and machine intelligence together are redefining the future of revenue teams. I'm very happy about that because one of the surveys said revenue management will be gone in about 4 years, so I'll be retiring early. Brilliant. So over to you. Thanks, Fabian.
Thank you very much. Exactly. My name is Fabian Prinz. I'm the head of sales at FLYR Hospitality, and I'll be talking about AI and the hotel revenue manager, evolution or extinction. So who here in the room is a hotel revenue manager or leads a commercial team? Perfect. So like Nicole said, you're all attending today to figure out if you're still going to have a job in 5 years? No, of course you will. Let me tell you why you will. So what are we going to be talking about today? So today, first, I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey through time, through the history of revenue management systems and the challenges and skills that came with it through the different eras. We're going to be diving a bit deeper into the tech, and I'm going to have a look at what does AI and machine learning in revenue management really enable. We're also going to be discussing the challenges of working with AI-driven systems and what the revenue skill set of the future looks like. But for now, let's go back all the way to the beginning. And I'll take us to the 1970s, where effectively revenue management saw its origin within the airline industry, as airlines tried to maximize passenger revenue based on the demand and perishability that they were seeing within their products. Now, another question, and there is actually a prize to be won that I brought with me from London. Does anybody know what was the first revenue management practice or tactic that was ever used? In the sense of time, I'll take 3 guesses. Just shout it into the room. Sorry?
Farming.
Sorry?
Farming.
Farming? Huh? You said yielding? Any other ideas? Maybe I'll give the prize to the best guess. Sorry? Dynamic pricing. That came much later.
Demand analysis on weekdays and weekends.
Also not?
Lead time pricing.
Lead time pricing also? It was actually much simpler than that. The first revenue management tactic that was ever used was by British Airways in the 1970s, the early booker rate. Demand segmentation, or rate fencing, as we would call it today. And then in the 1980s, we saw the emergence of yield management, which was pioneered by airlines and then slowly embraced by hotels. American Airlines was actually the airline who had the first automated system. And then hotels started segmenting customers, leisure versus business travelers, offering different rates for early bookings as well. And revenue managers mostly tracked manually occupancy, historical data, and local event schedules to set room prices. A lot of that happening on paper. The challenges that came with this was really the lack of real-time data, as well as the reliance on manual input and difficulty in predicting demand. Revenue management back then was really an art rather than a science. The skill set that was needed back then was really a deep understanding of the market and pricing based on experience, as well as generating quick insights through trial and error. The best revenue managers back then were really market experience and property experts. That brings us forward then to the 1990s, where we saw the first more sophisticated computerized systems, like, for example, Fidelio. Some of you might still remember working with it. That already allowed us to somewhat automate our pricing strategies, maybe across different bar levels. During this era, we also saw the growth of internet and OTAs that completely changed our landscape. And that came with a couple of challenges: more complex distribution and increased competition. The skill set needed back then was really PMS skill and Excel heavy, working with pickup reports, analyzing cancellations, and using, for example, reservation denial reports to understand the pricing elasticity. The best revenue managers back then were often reservation management experts. That brings us then forward to the era of the 2000s, where the first real hotel revenue management systems were introduced, relying mainly on historical data and manual forecasts for their optimization. But as revenue managers, we also had more data points available, such as accurate booking pace, same time last year comparisons, as well as performance tracking in different systems. But generating insights through this was often very Excel-heavy work to put all these data points together. We also saw the first introduction of rate shopping services and channel managers that were the answer to the increased competition and distribution landscape that we were seeing. The challenges that came back then in this area was managing the relationships with all these new OTAs that were popping up everywhere, as well as dealing with the commoditization of hotel rooms. The skill set needed back then was highly analytical and Excel-driven for this data cleaning and transformation that was required, as well as the experience working with the existing limited number of revenue management system providers to really understand how to fine-tune their performance. Back then, the best revenue manager was really the best person at Excel who had acquired the best system, the most system knowledge up to this point. In the 2010s, we then saw the emergence of big data. And that really increased the use of data analytics to refine pricing strategies and improve our forecasting accuracy. We also had more sophisticated RMSs using historical data, competitor pricing, as well as real-time demand signals to automate price changes. But they were mostly deterministic RMSs. That meaning they always assumed that their forecast was correct. More about that later. And they were mostly steered by if-then scenarios, at least defined by users who at that point had more sophisticated analytics available. That's what we would now call decision support. The challenges that came with this was really managing the information overload through all these new data points that were available, as well as differentiating hotel offerings in an extremely dynamic marketplace dominated by OTAs and meta search engines. There was also the time intensiveness of working with the RMSs that were present back then through managing overrides, sets of rules, special events, and forecast adjustments. The skill set that was needed back then was really solid, accurate forecasting, as well as understanding the algorithm and weights of different data points in these systems to fine-tune their performance. And that now brings us to the 2020s, where we see the rise of AI-driven revenue management. And there were really two big enablers for this. Enabler number one, the rise of cloud systems now enable extremely straightforward system connectivity, where data can be exchanged between systems extremely quickly. Extensive sets of data are now available, and we don't even need to rely anymore on REST APIs that only send data on a scheduled basis, but can, for example, work with streaming APIs, where data is pushed the moment it changes. Enabler number two was the big leap in computing power via GPUs that are extremely good at processing of mathematical data. They are now available via cloud computing, so tech providers can scale their computing requirements as needed to process these extremely large sets of information. So if we want to define AI in revenue management, it really involves using adaptable machine learning models to analyze these vast sets of data, making recommendations and taking actions while automatically learning from their own outcomes to fine-tune their own performance without the need for granular human interaction. Now, who would use ChatGPT as their RMS? I hope nobody, right? Because if we dive a bit deeper into what AI really means, the buzzword of AI has been everywhere over the last 2 years. But what does it really mean in revenue management? And before we go into that, let's define the different areas of AI. Because the first mention of artificial intelligence in literature was actually in the 1950s already. And we have the overarching aspect of AI. As part of that, we have machine learning. Machine learning is really a broad set of models that learn patterns from structured data to make predictions. They don't require massive data sets, and they also don't require huge computational power. But then we have deep learning. And deep learning is effectively a subfield of machine learning that uses artificial neural networks, effectively a simulation of how the human brain works. And that excels at really understanding highly complex patterns, especially in unstructured data, but it also needs significantly more computing power. And as a further subset of that, we have generative AI. That's what you know, for example, at ChatGPT. It can create new things based out of its learnings, like, for example, language, the images I used in the previous slides, or, for example, lifelike videos, like what you see on Sora that maybe has fooled some of us already in some Instagram videos of cats shooting with shotguns, for example. Now, we also need to make a differentiation between generic and vertical AI. Generic AI, like, for example, ChatGPT, it's intelligent, it's smart, it can do quite a lot of things well, but it doesn't necessarily understand hospitality. And then we have vertical AI, which is really the industry-specific application of these machine learning and deep learning models. It's purpose-built for hospitality, and it deeply understands the key concepts, patterns, and behaviors at play. Now that we've defined it, let's have a look at what the embrace of AI and machine learning technology really enables. And the first point here is really the evolvement from algorithms to complex pricing models and engines, where we have large sets of algorithms and models working in conjunction with each other. An example for this can, for example, be an ensemble forecasting approach. So instead of a system always using the same forecasting methodology, a system might now dynamically select different forecasting methodologies based on the data it's seeing, and it's using backtests to see which forecasting methodologies are the most accurate. And this could differ by property. It could even differ by seasonality. Second, we have the ability for enhanced data processing and dynamic evaluation. So using machine learning and deep learning, an RMS can process these data sets much faster and accurate than traditional methods, providing us with deeper insights. But, and that's important, not all data is created equal. We have historical data, future demand data, competitor data, market compression data. But which data points should the system use at which points in time? Back then, we were setting these weights themselves. But now the system can actually decide itself which data points currently give us the best signals and exclude data points that are not valuable anymore. To give you an example, maybe your property was performing horribly last December. But this year, December, is looking really, really positive. Should we still rely on the historical information from last year for our optimization? Probably not. That brings us further to predictive analytics, where the system can identify patterns and trends that might be missed by human analysis alone. And therefore, we can predict more future demand more accurately, which leads to better planning and pricing strategies. Now, don't get me wrong. Accurate forecasts can be produced manually, but it's often very time-intensive. And the time effort required to generate good accuracy often outweighs the benefits of that accuracy in comparison to really using strategic pricing actions in that time. Therefore, we're looking for the best mix of forecasting that's both as accurate as possible, but also efficient. It also gives us more advancements when it comes to pricing and inventory control, which can be more granular on room type level or even rate code level without the need for derived pricing. And it also impacts the frequency of optimization, where optimization can run hourly or even in real time rather than just a couple of times per day. There is also, and that's actually one of my favorites, the inclusion of uncertainty or the inclusion of Bayesian thinking. Because in the past, systems were mostly deterministic, meaning they assumed that their forecasts are correct. And they're always optimized against that one single outcome. But the challenge in this scenario is that a system doesn't know when it's uncertain, so it can't adapt its pricing aggressiveness during volatile periods. So instead of treating things as certain, Bayesian thinking introduces the thinking that believes are probabilities that are constantly evolving. And based on the certainty of data and trends, the system can choose whether it would like to explore or exploit. So during an exploration phase, the system might test pricing elasticity itself, learning very, very frequently, and then applying these learnings. That also often quickly leads to the need for less historical data, where systems can optimize fully automatically within 1 to 2 weeks, even with no historical data at all, rather than the 3 to 4 months that were mostly required within the past. And last but not least, we have the aspect of influenceability, where we can influence pricing on strategic level, for example, just by prompting the system to be more or less aggressive. That eradicates the need for hard overrides, creating rules or adjusting forecasts, while ensuring that the human expertise is not lost here. Now, if you've ever thought to yourself, I want a system that works for me rather than me working for the system, it's really now the responsibility of these engines to understand what you're trying to achieve and to apply those learnings in the future. And that really enables the move from decision support, where the human interprets and decides, as I mentioned before, to decision intelligence, where the human oversees and refines system decisions. Now, you might be saying, Fabian, you're telling us all these great things, but do you have the data to back it up? So in preparation for this presentation, I sat down with our data science team, and we had a look at a sample of 2,000 properties. Of course, I only have access to the data of our customers. Of these 2,000 properties, 96% are fully automated, and for the next 365 days, they're achieving an AI pricing coverage of 95%, meaning less than 5% of all stay days are actively influenced by a revenue manager aside from the strategic settings that they've set up, all while getting to a 30-day forecast accuracy of 96%. And just last week, I was actually meeting with one of our customers in London who told me that 6 months into using the system, they're now actually thinking of completely eradicating their manual forecasting processes because they found that the time needed to create these forecasts was actually just not worth it anymore. But it's of course not all gold that glitters. There are certain challenges that come with working with AI-driven systems as well. And the first important one here is change management. And it's mostly dealing with replacement fear, where it's about accepting a system as a co-pilot that's testing its own data-driven assumptions rather than just an executor of plans that we've already made before. There's also the aspect of moving from an if-then thinking to a what-if thinking. So instead of if a competitor changes my rate, I will change my rate, what if a competitor changes my rate? What are the data points that I need to make a good decision about the situations where it will make sense to change my rate? There's also the aspect of results versus explainability. The engines at play nowadays have simply become too complex to simply understand without a PhD in data science. And working AI first really means prioritizing performance and strategic influence over explainability of pricing decisions on a granular or daily level. But Particularly in the beginning, this can lead to challenges when discussing pricing actions with stakeholders, as the logic, for example, during one of these exploration phases that I mentioned before, might not be as intuitive from the beginning. There's also the aspect of data quality and data bias. If the initial data is biased, this can lead to biased decisions, for example, in emerging markets where we need to keep testing our assumptions. And if the quality of collected data is bad, we all know garbage in, garbage out, the recommendation and optimizations won't be well in line either. So, like as we've heard in the rate gain presentation before, if you're still having a reservations team that spends hours per day manually punching in reservations, there might be some processes to solve before going full on AI here. There's also, we need to be aware of the AI limitations. And this is the most important point here, is contextual understanding. And contextual understanding is what we as humans are extremely good at. For example, extreme weather events, political events, changes in business strategy. They create non-quantifiable variables that might not show in the data right away. And this is where we need to be able to quickly understand where we should prompt the system and how we should influence it. And last but not least, there is also the aspect of ethical use. Just because the data shows us that we can sell an economy room in certain situations for $1,000, $1,500, does that really mean we should? And what's the impact it will be having on our reputation? And there are also regulatory implications. Some of you might have heard about the adjustments to the Cartwright Act in California that will be in effect from 2026 going forward, where revenue management systems it will actually be forbidden by law for them to use competitor data in their algorithms, as it can be understood as a form of pricing collusion. Now, that we've discussed the challenges that come with it, what do we really imagine the skill set of the revenue manager in the future to look like? And it all starts with tech literacy. We really believe revenue management teams should be the custodians of the tech setup and data flows, simply because they have the most sophisticated need for it, as it most directly impacts their KPIs. This is shortly followed by data literacy. We will be spending less time doing data transformation, but we'll need more knowledge on how to query big data points from data warehouses and visualize these within BI platforms, really with the goal to make informed decisions rather than educated guesses. We also need, in line with that contextual understanding that I mentioned before, multi-layered strategic oversight on portfolio and property level, where we need to be able to understand quickly when and where we should apply our human intelligence and that contextual understanding where we as humans are extremely good at. Now, cross-departmental collaboration has been important for many years already, but the soft skills that come and have developed into the revenue management role, back from the times where revenue managers were considered like the people with their spreadsheets in the basement of the hotel, the soft skills will become even more important there. We'll be spending more time trying to collaborate effectively with marketing, sales, and operations to ensure the seamless integration of these AI strategies across the hotel's operations. And last but not least, there's stakeholder communication and contextualization. It's our responsibility to translate these AI outputs into actionable strategies that can be importantly understood by non-technical stakeholders like owners or executive teams, with a focus again on performance and accuracy rather than explainability. And that will really enable the move from revenue tactician to commercial strategist. So in conclusion, throughout the presentation, we discussed the evolution that the revenue management role and the systems have seen over the last 40 years and how advancements in machine learning are impacting the system landscape today. Now, will AI replace the hotel revenue manager? No, but it's significantly evolving the way how they work. Revenue managers are really evolving from revenue tacticians to commercial strategists that are influencing AI engines and orchestrating data insights into holistic, cross-departmental strategies. And to finish it off, I would like to leave you with a quote by Robert van Rijsbergen, manager of the Dillon Group, who told this to me about like 1.5 years ago when explaining his data strategy to me, and it stayed with me ever since. And that's automate everything that's predictable so we can humanize everything that's exceptional. Thank you very much.